Hey, everybody, welcome to episode 48 of the Eat for Endurance podcast. Today, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I am getting personal and telling my own nutrition story. And this is really spontaneous. To be perfectly honest, I actually don't have any other interviews lined up to record at the moment. I have a lot of emails out, and either people are busy right now and we have them scheduled later in the year, or people just haven't responded and I need to follow up. So I thought, well, maybe I should turn this back on myself and we'll kind of see what happens. And very much unlike my usual interviews where I do tons of research and prep and write out, kind of an outline of my questions and all of that, I'm kind of just coming to this randomly. Well, maybe not so randomly, but it's a beautiful day outside and I have no clients planned this afternoon and I was like, maybe I'll just retreat to my dark podcasting closet and do a little chatting, do a little podcast therapy, I guess we can call it, since I'm just going to be talking about me today. So this could either be very interesting or it could be a total disaster and maybe will never be published. We shall see. Um, so, if you're here for mostly the bigger named athletes and you're more interested in that kind of stuff, you can give this one a skip. If you maybe want to learn a little bit more about me, I'm obviously not an elite athlete. I'm very much an everyday athlete, everyday runner, recreational runner, and of course, a sports dietitian. Then give this one a listen and see what you think. So I'm just going to kind of go through all of this as if I were interviewing myself. I'm not going to be asking myself questions, but I think I'll try to roughly follow the outline that I normally follow for my guests. And we'll just kind of see where this all takes me. I'm very much just speaking from the heart here and seeing what comes out. So forgive me if I start rambling. All right, so let's get going. Nutrition growing up. This is usually where I start my interviews. Well, I was born and raised in Santa Cruz, California, right where I am right now, actually, 5 minutes away from where I'm currently living with my parents who are doctors. And um, you think maybe in a household with doctors, be very more health conscious or such. But I mean, even physicians now, very much, they don't get much nutrition training. And back in the 80s, as many of my guests have said, I mean, it was just a different time, right? So, I don't know, food memories when I was little. I remember non-fat milk always being in the house. My dad as we all have genetically high cholesterol back in the day where, things were leaning more to the fat-free stuff. I remember lots of I don't know, like Doritos and lots of junk in the house. But just like normal food too. My mom would cook. I certainly remember making my fair share of, ramen and mac and cheese and that kind of stuff with my older sister. I have a sister who's 6.5 years older than me. And just, normal stuff. Nothing really stands out too much when it comes to food growing up. There really were no like rules or restrictions per se. I was able to kind of eat mostly what I wanted, and that included both healthy foods and less healthy foods. And yeah, nothing really stands out. And um, yeah, so not much else to say there. Not too interesting in terms of the food scene in my household. Um, and in terms of, how I got into running, running, I did kind of dabble here and there in some sports, but I was never really much of a sporty person, and really no one in my family was. Um, I actually have a master's degree in opera performance. Music was a huge, huge part of my life, pretty much from when I started piano at age 5 up until I got my master's degree at age 22. And it was like music and academics; those were the main things. My sister was also in music, and my parents are very much intellectual types, and that was kind of the scene. And as much as my parents were hikers and they used to do lots of active things when they were younger, they were never really like sporty people per se. And I certainly was horrible at team sports. So I just have these memories of like PE and junior high, and it just like I hated it so much. I mean, basketball, oh my God, it was just excruciating for me. I never was any good. pretty sure I got picked on or was picked, the type of person that was picked last. Never really had much confidence when it came to anything really active, other than like horseback riding. I did a little bit of that. I did a little bit of, kind of family activities. We used to go like camping and, go on walks and just do some pretty like casual stuff, but definitely wasn't like a sporty person. Um, and I do remember though, my sister, she's quite a bit older. She's 6.5 years older. I remember her going off to college and she was dating this rower. And really, she got super into going to the gym and trying to eat more healthy and all that kind of stuff. And I remember coming home on a break, and this is like very clearly in my mind. I remember her saying, okay, well, we need to eat better, and these are the things we can't eat, and these are the things we can't eat. And funny enough, I haven't even like really talked to her about this, and we're very close, and I'm actually going to talk to her about this after I record because I'm just thinking about this now. And all I can remember that was on the do not eat list was like Ritz crackers. Like my memory of this is very fuzzy, but like a couple things stand out. I remember Ritz crackers. I'm sure like vegetables and things were on the do eat list, but this was kind of like almost my first introduction to like food rules or food is good and bad and any of that kind of language that we see a lot now. And of course, the type of work I do a lot of work with people who have eating disorders or disordered eating, especially in the athletic world. And for me personally, this was kind of like my first look at that. And I was young. I must have been, gosh, in junior high, or I don't even remember. But I remember she would try to get me to like go running with her or do active things with her, or go to the gym. And so that was like my very first introduction to kind of being active in a slightly more structured way. And I did enjoy it, although even if like the angle was off, right? It was kind of like we have to be healthy and lose, not necessarily lose weight, but just kind of. And I was also in this weird, awkward phase of my life where I was kind of like going through puberty and getting a little. I was a very kind of round faced girl, and I was a little bit awkward, and body was changing and all that kind of stuff. So it was a very weird time. I can remember that, and yeah, so that was kind of like my first introduction to running, and I wasn't doing anything consistent. I can't really remember anything like that. It was a very busy time. I was doing a little bit of dance, but I sucked at it, but I loved it. And I was mostly doing music and school, and I had my bat mitzvah. There's a lot of stuff going on at that point in my life, 12, 13, all of that. And yeah, so I remember that. And then I remember going into high school. I didn't kind of really come into my love of running or really discover anything structured with exercise until high school, specifically when I turned 15. It was my sophomore year in high school. And my one of my friends was part of the cross country running team. And funny enough, well, I guess it wasn't funny at the time. I was pretty devastated. But I had gone through a pretty bad breakup. It was like the first love of my life, and was pretty distraught and threw myself into, schoolwork and music, which pretty much was my life all of, this time. And my friend was like, "Hey, come run with me. It'll make you feel better. Like, let's do this. We'll take your mind off things." She was a year ahead of me. And I was like, okay, but there's like no way I'm gonna be able to run like one loop of the track. And, got some shoes on. God knows what kind of shoes I had around. But got some shoes on and tried to do one lap. Pretty sure I almost died. And, but kind of, I don't remember the specifics, but whatever happened, I decided to kind of give it a try and join the cross country team, which was very out of character for me. I never identified myself as an athletic person. No one in my family really, again, identified themselves as athletic people. And I was like, why not? Let's do it. And this was a very busy time in terms of school and music and everything. I was like, screw it, let's just do it. And it was amazing. I was immediately hooked. I mean, I felt so empowered. I felt so strong. I improved so much. I actually ended up going with my team to, I think it was some sort of Central Coast championship or something. And I wasn't any amazing runner. Like, don't get me wrong, I definitely was not very fast. I wasn't like winning anything. I was very much middle of the pack, but I discovered I was really good at pacing, and I did improve tremendously. I don't even remember what my times were. I have no idea. I can't even for the life of me remember anything related to nutrition. I always ask my guests, like, were you making this connection? Yeah, I literally have no clue. I have absolutely no idea what I was doing with any of this stuff. Um, but I do remember just certain feelings or certain moments, with running, and I ended up getting, like, most improved player, teammate, I don't know, whatever the word was. But I just remember being really proud of myself, and feeling really good and thinking, wow, this running thing is pretty awesome. And that was really the start of running for me. And yeah, I think high school was a bit of a tricky time, as it is for many people. And again, the question I often ask my guess is, what did your diet look like back in high school and college, and how's it evolved, right? So um, that brings me into, I'd say, kind of slightly darker times in my own past. And this isn't something I've necessarily been hiding at all. I certainly have not been trying to be, hiding the fact that I've had some eating disorder and disordered eating history in my past. But it's also not something, I guess I would say, I've been like publicizing very much. For whatever reason, I've kind of like sprinkled information in my interviews that I've, related to things people have said in my own show, and I've also shared things. So I might be kind of saying something I've said before. But yeah, I haven't really gone in depth because, well, I haven't been the topic of one of these stories. So yeah, this is a little new, and sorry again, I'm rambling because this is not a planned out thing. But yeah, I guess in high school, it was a stressful time. There was a lot of pressure. I was trying to get into an Ivy League school. I did. I went to Yale, but there's a lot going on. I was commuting hours south and north for school, for orchestra. Like I was a very scheduled kid, I guess you could say. Um, I ended up not really doing cross country for much longer, because there were just too many demands from other things. But I did keep up running just for, just to feel good and here and there, and it was fun. But definitely, I don't remember when. I want to say maybe it was 16, maybe it was my junior. I can't actually recall how old I was or the exact moment or anything like that. But there was some time where my relationship with food and body just went south. And in high school, I wouldn't say it was anything extreme necessarily, but and this is, I think, the part that I've shared before in an interview. I forget which one, but I just remember reading 17 magazine, and there was an article about bulimia, and it was literally like, the message was like, don't do this, basically, like, don't make yourself throw up. It's bad. It's not good for you. And that being having a twisted teenage mind, it's like, oh, that's a great idea. And again, I can't recall like all of the details of it, but I remember becoming a little bit more obsessive, a little bit more self-conscious, and making myself purge occasionally. It wasn't frequent. Again, I don't even know how often it was, but I mean, if it's happening at all, that's a problem, right? So I remember talking to my mom about it at some point. So she was like vaguely aware, but didn't really know what to do about it. And I was kind of still going about my life. But it was weird stuff. Like, I used to, every weekend I would drive up to with my parents up to San Francisco for orchestra rehearsal. So, and my high school was an hour in the opposite direction. Again, I did a lot of driving. And our rehearsal would start like 1 p.m. And I remember like having these little competitions with myself, like, oh, I wonder if I can not eat anything until like right before rehearsal starts. It's like, I'm not sure why. It was like some weird game with myself. Very, very, very disordered behavior. Um, so yeah, and certainly, some fear of gaining weight or just being hypercritical of my body, all that kind of stuff. So that was all kind of swirling around in high school. Um, Graduated, went to Yale, gained the freshman 15, was having a blast, fell in love with another guy, got into this relationship I was pretty much in and, well, out of for the next 5 years. Um, and it kind of took on a more serious nature, I guess you could say. And at this point, I wasn't really like running. I wasn't competing, or, I wasn't on any team. I wasn't even regularly doing anything. I more like was going to the gym. So it was like, okay, I have to go to the gym. And exercise turned into something that was no longer healthy for me. You know, as I was in college, for sure, I don't think I could really, well, I was skipping days, but I had this regimen. I have to exercise was more like something I had to do. Certainly a fear of gaining weight, very controlling around food. And I think at some point, I think maybe when I broke up, we broke up, or, yeah, it was another relationship thing, I think. And, it kind of triggered me going back into disordered eating behavior and eating disorder purging, um, and and losing some weight and not really being in a healthy place. I'm pretty sure, again, I haven't really gone through a timeline of all this in a really long time. And right now I'm kind of just, again, winging this. So I apologize that I'm not telling the story in a very coherent or perhaps organized way. But um, but I'm sharing from the heart. So we'll see what comes out. But yeah, I guess at some point I sought therapy because I was pretty depressed. I was really struggling. And I did like a one of those group counseling things. I had a individual counselor, and I I guess things got a little bit better. To be honest, all of this is very blurry to me. I was very much throwing myself into my work as usual. I was still doing all my music stuff, and it would ebb and flow. There would be times where things were healthier. I was having fun socially, things were good. There'd be other times where I'd be really struggling and have a lot of anxiety and feeling really, really not great. Um, and unfortunately, I think confidence, self-confidence, self-esteem was a big issue. I probably tied that way too much to this relationship I was in and out of for far too long, and yeah, just wasn't great. um, and then, I graduated. I went to, so after I stayed at Yale for a fifth year, I was doing a 5-year BA MM program, graduated, and decided that I was no longer going to do music, which was a bit of an identity crisis, I guess you could say, because I had always been Claire the oboist. And this is for sure a side of me that none of you would have seen, right? Because it's been almost 20 years since I've been playing my oboe regularly. But just to give some context, I was playing at a very, very high level. I was in a program that pretty much everybody was going professional. I was performing somewhat at a professional level. I was doing gigs, and I'd already traveled around the world doing orchestral stuff, tours and whatnot. High school was pretty intense with the group. I was in the San Francisco Symphony Youth Orchestra. It was it was a very wonderful privilege to be part of that group. So music had always been a very, very serious thing for me. So and then I just stopped because I didn't, it wasn't my dream. It wasn't my dream anymore. And I didn't really know what my dream was, but I knew it wasn't that. So here I was, 22 years old, found myself in New York City because the only thing I wanted to do was finally support myself and work and just live my life and see what happened. And I think I always knew I was going to go back to grad school and do something else. I was contemplating med school, I was contemplating all kinds of things, but feeling very lost. And but early 20s in New York City for the first time, I mean, I was living it up. I was making friends, I was partying a ton. I was working in a big law firm. I kind of just I didn't know what to do with myself. So it seemed everybody from school was, either going into consulting, or they were going to law school or med school, or maybe they were becoming paralegals or legal assistants before they went to law school, or something else, right? But so that's what I did. I was like, well, maybe law school is an option. I don't know. I'll do something. I'll figure it out. For now, let me just make some cash and enjoy my life a little bit after a very intense experience of being in school nonstop and trying to get perfect grades. So me being the overachiever for sure. And so yeah, I became a legal assistant at Cravath, Sweden and Moore, which is a very big New York City law firm. Told myself I was going into it eyes wide open, knowing they were going to work me to death. But you know how it is. You tell yourself you're prepared for something, and the reality is just a different story. I was absolutely miserable there. It was the worst. I was there for almost 4 years, maybe 3 years, 8 months. I forget what it was. Way too long. Let's just put it that way. quickly realized law was not for me. Despised that entire environment. I did not want anything to do with it. But um, yeah, I think the first year I was just kind of, well, it's a means to an end. I'm just supporting myself and having some fun and whatever. Had a totally like nightmare roommate situation, living with a complete psychopath I found on Craigslist who also, funny enough, again, not so funny, but had an eating disorder, and was like, she was crazy, like legit. It was really not a pleasant experience. And I was there for a year, absolutely miserable. Finally got out, lived by myself, um, and kind of just fell into another really deep depression. I felt trapped. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. I was just like, who am I? I'm no longer an oboist. I don't know what's going on. And that's kind of when the eating disorder took over and morphed into something entirely different. It became more of kind of overexercise, I would say. Definitely, there was fear of gaining weight. It was an absolute control issue. I felt out of control everywhere else in my life. Um, I didn't know, I was lost. I was lonely. New York was like it was a very exciting, fun place. And when I first moved there, and I loved it. And I was making all these friends, and we were going out, and I was just like living it up. And then it just became this place where I don't know. Again, I just felt trapped and very, very lonely and very sad. And the one thing that I could control, was exercise and what I ate, and that became like my life. And it just sounds so sad when I think about it. And I seriously look back on my early to mid 20s, and it just, my heart aches. My heart aches for that younger version of myself. Ugh, I just, yeah, it's it's sad. Oh, okay, a little emotional. But anyways, so yeah, it became this time where I could not miss a day of exercise, like 1,000%. If I skipped a day, there would be so much anxiety. I remember going to the gym so hungover from a night of partying, but I was like, gotta sweat it out, gotta sweat it out. Um, but because I was still going out and drinking and partying and doing all the stuff. Um, and yeah, just being obsessive about food. I wasn't purging so much anymore, but it would happen occasionally. And in kind of the first half of me being in New York, I mean, I just lost weight. I lost so much weight. I got down to about 96 pounds, which, I mean, I'm 5'4.5". That is sickly looking. I had such bad body dysmorphia. Looking back at those photos, like, makes me cringe. I just look sick. I would see my bones. It just, I looked horrible. And I didn't see it. I just wouldn't see it at the time. I just didn't see it. And strangely, like I get compliments from people at the gym. Oh, you look great. Just wait, and like, that kind of stuff just makes me mad right now to think about that. I just want to like hug this younger version of myself. Be like, oh, if only you knew that this doesn't matter. It just doesn't matter. So yeah, I felt very trapped. I remember flying back to California because I think I got like 2 weeks of vacation a year. I got like nothing, right? And I remember going back for a very short trip to see my parents and being in La Selva Beach. Again, 5 minutes from where I am now, and it was a beautiful day. And I would go for a run or a walk, and I was by myself. I was just like crying, and I'm just like, I miss home so much, and it's so beautiful here. And why didn't I appreciate this when I lived here growing up? Because of course, growing up in Santa Cruz, I'm like, this place sucks. This place is so boring. There's nothing to do. And we would just like smoke weed in the car and listen to CDs or something, or just do nothing. And I've said this before in other interviews that like I never was running in these beautiful redwood forests or on the beach. I mean, I just wasn't taking advantage, which is like bonkers to me to think about now. But I just remember being home in my early 20s, coming back and just not wanting to leave. And the trip was so short, and I just missed everything. So homesick. And going back to the grind, going back to New York City and going back to that life. Um, and I remember another trip. I went to Hawaii with my family, and I remember I was shivering. I couldn't stop shivering. And there wasn't a huge period of time that I was like below 100 pounds. It was maybe it was less than a year. But it was in this time period, and my parents hadn't said anything for the whole time. And I remember I was shivering. We were snorkeling. My dad and I were snorkeling. And I just couldn't stop shivering. And my dad finally was like, "That's it. Like, you are way too skinny. Like, we have to fix this. This is not okay." I mean, it was so bad, my obsession with exercise. I was literally sneaking into the Four Seasons Hotel in Wailea. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Wailea, but like they have like these outdoor gyms. It's really awesome actually. But you literally, or at least I used to, have this little section where you walk in from the pools and they have ellipticals and treadmills or whatever, and it's all outdoors. I would sneak in and like work out because our condo had no gym. And I was just like paralyzed by anxiety over the fact that I wouldn't have access to a gym. I think I even like drove 45 minutes one day to go to a gym across the island. I mean, again, so messed up. I'm on vacation in Hawaii and I'm like trying to be in a gym. That's how much I just couldn't let go of that need to exercise. Um, but anyways, so that was just like a little bit of a wake up call, and that's when I was like, okay, this has gone too far. This is not okay. I'm not happy. I need to fix this, and kind of greater self awareness. And I started therapy, and I'd been kind of in and out of therapy before, but started therapy again, and that was a little helpful. But it wasn't until I'm trying to remember what it was. Oh, I remember. Basically, I'd just been trying to like figure out how can I get out of here and what to do next because I just felt stuck. And I went on a Birthright Israel trip, which, if anyone's not familiar, it's free to anyone who's Jewish or has any Jewish heritage below age, I want to say 26. Um, and I was like, you know what? This is free. I don't really have any money. This is great. I'm going to go on this trip and let's do it. So I think I was 24 at the time, I want to say. And I went on this trip, and we left on New Year's Eve. So literally it was New Year's while we were on the plane to Israel. And I did this amazing trip, and met so many incredible people, and just had this amazing time. And that was kind of the impetus to everything, that trip. And it wasn't, I don't want to get all spiritual or anything. I mean, I'm Jewish, but I wouldn't say I'm the most religious person or anything. But I was at the Western Wall, Wailing Wall, whatever you want to call it. And I remember just putting my little notes in there. Again, I can't remember the details, but the gist probably was just wishing for a better, more joyful, healthier life for myself. Just wishing to be less lost, wishing to find a way. And putting in those cracks and planting those seeds, and coming back. I was really tired and very sick. Everybody on this trip got sick. I mean, we were basically not sleeping and partying the whole time. But I just remember coming back with this, like, that's it. I'm going to change everything now, and we're going to do something different. It's time for a big life change. And I had always kind of toyed around with the idea of world travel, taking some time off. I had never been to South America, and I kind of latched on to this whole idea of doing like Carnival in Brazil. I was very intrigued by Brazil and just South America generally speaking. And I started looking into it, and I started just kind of playing around with it and doing lots of research. And I was a complete slacker at my job. I basically like billed all these hours and barely did any work. I was so checked out for so long at that job, and was almost like waiting for them to fire me. It was ridiculous. I mean, that job, man, we were like sleeping under a desk. I mean, I don't know if anyone knows law firm life. It's not good work-life balance at big firms. And yeah, and so I decided, you know what, quitting my job, and I'm going to do what I'm calling my quarter life crisis trip. When I turn 25, I'm going to South America. I'm doing a solo backpacking journey. And that's what I did. At first, it was like this weird, like, oh, I'm gonna volunteer and work and do it, like, because I had in my head, like, it had to be productive. It's always the challenge I have. Something has to be productive. And I was like, screw that, man. I'm just gonna go and experience the world. I'm gonna challenge myself. I'm going to get myself out of my comfort zone. I'm gonna learn new languages. I'm gonna meet new people. I'm going to force myself to let go of all of this fucking crap with my body and food. I'm not going to be working out in gyms. I'm not going to have control over my food. I am going to get out of here in all senses. And I remember my parents being like, "You're not doing that." And I was like, "Well, I'm 24 years old, so you have no say." And they're like, "Okay, cool. I'll help you then. And we'll see what we can do to support you." And yeah, and that's pretty much what happened. September of, I guess, what was it? 2006, I want to say. I set out with a backpack, flew to Ecuador, did very intensive Spanish for a month in Quito. And I have a very strong language background in French, and I kind of taught myself Italian, and I'd already done a little Spanish, so I picked it up very quickly and was near fluent pretty quickly. And I mean, I had to be. I was traveling by myself as a woman in South America, and yeah, and set out on this big adventure, which was absolutely bonkers. I just wanted to get myself out of depression, out of a rut, and just challenge myself. So that's what I did. I traveled around for, I think it was 8 or 9 months. The only things I had planned, because part of my thing is, I'm not a very spontaneous person. Normally I'm very organized and a planner. And so I kind of set this loose itinerary, but with the knowledge that everything could change, everything could be flexible. This is the kind of trip where you don't really book too many accommodations in advance. You just kind of go. And the only thing I booked was I was hiking the Inca Trail, which is really hardcore, by the way. I thought it was like super, super fit. And I was like, I'm not going to use a porter to carry my backpack. Big mistake. Altitude sickness is a thing. Got very sick and paid like a last minute porter to take my stuff. But yeah, I booked the Inca Trail, which was incredible. And I, booked this family stay thing I did. And I just booked a ticket from Rio because I knew I was going to fly into Quito and at some point down the line fly out of Rio de Janeiro. And it was amazing. I mean, it was also crazy and scary and lonely and just absolutely nuts. This entire experience, I gained a ton of weight, which was scary and terrifying. I actually don't even know what I got up to, but I mean, I guess I can post some pictures of myself. Maybe I'll do that if I end up publishing this. um, but I mean, I just remember all of my friends seeing photos of me, like at the end of my trip in Brazil. I had like crazy curly hair because my hair is really weird and went from like straight to ringlets randomly. I have this crazy curly hair. I'm like probably 40 pounds heavier, 30 pounds heavier. I don't even know. And I was feeling pretty crappy about my weight and really like struggling with it. But then at some point, I just kind of made peace with it and was like, oh, cool. I'm in a larger body. This is cool. Like, I got all these curves now. I have boobs. Like, this is interesting. And people were seeing me like, so healthy and so happy. And I mean, I did. I really did. Um, and I'm not trying to say this was some miraculous recovery from my issues. It certainly was not. They still were there. It was always like an ongoing thing. But it really changed things for me, just kind of forcing myself to, I mean, I had no choice. I was just out there and doing stuff. And the weight gain was, I mean, my body needed it. It needed to change. It needed to get that weight back. Um, and yeah, so it was a very big adventure. I ended up meeting a guy from England, and I still didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And I wasn't really thinking that my travels would solve the issue, but I ended up, after a while, moving to London, in part to be with this guy, or mostly be with this guy, but also because I just had no ties anywhere. I mean, at what other point in my life I had no kids at the time. I had nothing, no job that I had to go back to. I really had no home. I had no nothing. So I was like, okay, cool. Well, why don't I just continue this adventure, move to London? The only job I could get was in the legal field. So I unfortunately was working in another large law firm and another job I despised, although whatever. And just kind of went with it. And I actually, that's when I came back to running, funny enough. I I hadn't really been running regularly, and it's crazy. I spent, almost 4 years in New York City in my 20s, and I was like never in Central Park. I mean, again, like not taking advantage of where I'm at. I literally was living like 2 blocks from what's called Columbus Circle. I was right there. It was so pathetic. I would go the Equinox like at Columbus Circle. I was never running in the park. Oh, again, makes my heart sad to think about that. I was so close the entire time I was there. Um, I did one race randomly. I think I did a 5K, New York Roadrunners 5K with somebody, with a friend one time, and I was like, "Oh yeah, this whole running thing is pretty fun." Such an idiot. And and so it wasn't, yeah, it wasn't until my, I guess, late 20s. I think I was 26, so I, no, 27, 26, I forget. But through my firm, there was like a corporate, one of those corporate 5K challenges or whatever. And they needed another person from the firm to be there. So I was like, okay, cool, I guess I'll go. Hadn't run at all, was so out of shape. Had kind of been going to the gym, but whatever. It was really, really not in running shape and nearly died, but ran this race. And I was like, oh my gosh, running is amazing. I forgot how much I love to run. And it was just right back into it. I mean, oh, I'm so grateful for that. I can't tell you how grateful I am for that moment. I really do think everything in my life, like looking, I mean, it's easy to look back and think, oh, this led to that and that led to that, but um, it was a key moment, and I really rediscovered my love of running, and it kind of got me on that whole train to distance running again, um, because I really sucked at running, but for anyone who's kind of gotten back into running after a really long break, or you feel really out of shape or whatever, it's really hard, but like your gains are immense in that first 6 months or whatever it is. So I just started training. I had one of the lawyers in my firm lived not far from me, and I would meet up with her and we'd run on the river, in London. We'd run in the morning. It was beautiful. We'd run all south base. If you're familiar with London, I lived kind of just south of Tower of London, so we'd run up and we'd run along to Waterloo and around there, South Bank, etc. And it was just like really beautiful. And she convinced me. I don't know if she convinced me to do it. I think she did. She convinced me to do a 10K. I was terrified. Did a 10K. It was great. Ended up doing it by myself because she couldn't come. I think she was sick, or I forget what happened. And met some other people, and just it kind of again got me on this like whole train to like maybe I should do a half marathon. Oh my God, that's so terrifying. But I signed up for a half marathon, and I ended up training for it. And this was one of these other circumstances of turns out, breakups really fuel my running apparently. So this English guy and we broke up. It was for the best. It was a mutual thing, but breakups suck. And here I was pretty alone in a foreign country now, not really sure what's next. And threw myself into running again and really trained hard and was doing like speed work and really getting into it again actually not again, for the first time really. And discovered I actually wasn't a bad runner. I ended up running 1:37 in that half marathon, totally surprised myself. Didn't realize I would be anywhere close to that fast. I had lost a little bit of weight as well, just naturally as a part of training. And at this point, my whole relationship with food and everything, I was definitely like the eating disorder itself was behind me, long behind me. I hadn't purged or restricted or done anything like that in a long time. But, like those leftover thoughts, feelings, and criticisms of your body, all those things, they stay a while. Anyone who's recovered from an eating disorder, and I will throw it out there too, I was never like diagnosed with anything. I was never in a formal treatment program or anything like that. But again, it doesn't matter. If you're doing these behaviors, that's a serious thing. That's a big deal, and you have to address them, right? So, yeah, I was at this point where I was still obviously very conscious of my body, conscious of what I was eating, trying not to gain weight or whatever, but I wasn't overly obsessive about it, so I was in a slightly better place at least. And running really helped me. It helped me. I started paying more attention to what I was eating in terms of making that connection for the first time. Really, this is my late 20s. And as I got more into distance running, I mean, this is what prompted me to become a dietitian. This is it. It was my love of running. It was my interest in endurance, because this half marathon, finishing that race, I was like, holy crap, I'm not bad at this. I'm really good at pacing. I felt so strong. I could totally do a marathon. And I signed up pretty much almost immediately. It was too late to sign up for London, unfortunately. And I lived in London for a while, and I never ran London Marathon, which like is so ridiculous. But I ended up signing up for Paris. So that was my first marathon. I signed up for it for the, what is it, like I guess 5 months later or whatever it was. And and yeah, and that really, again, that really kicked things off, and that pretty much solidified like I want to investigate this whole running, nutrition, sports, nutrition thing. This is kind of forming, like my path is forming now. And I think I was, gosh, like 28 at the time, 27. I can't even remember. I was in my late 20s. And that January before the April Paris Marathon, that's when I met my husband. We met in like a pub in the middle of a snowstorm at a birthday party of like a mutual acquaintance that we didn't really like that much, but we had kind of trudged, kind of made ourselves come out and go all the way across town to this birthday party. And he was into running and I was into running. We kind of bonded over that, and that's how I met Eric. He was in London a total of like 11 years. I was in London for, what, 4? I forget. I think 4 years. Um, and that's where it all kicked off. So, another thing that running really, I mean, it brought me into what I'm doing today, which I'm so passionate about. And it essentially brought me to my husband. That relationship took a while to to kind of develop. I was very much resistant to his advances for a while, but eventually he won me over. But yeah, I ran the Paris Marathon, and I will say, oh my God, nutrition, man, what a disaster. I had no idea what I was doing. I was reading stuff and I was starting to study a little bit on my own, and starting to think about, ooh, maybe this is something I want to go back to school for. And even like, I didn't even really know what a registered dietitian was at that time, and just looking at programs and all of that, kind of, starting to think about maybe it's time I quit my job and go back to the US, be closer to my family. And but for Paris, like, I was just, like, eating all the wrong stuff. I think I was eating, like, a ton of, like, whole wheat pita bread the day before. I don't even know what I was eating, but all I know is race morning, oh, man, I did not feel good. I did not feel good. I had horrible gas. Like, I will spare you all the details, but let's just say that there were no bathrooms. Like, one thing about Paris Marathon, at least back in 2010, they had, like, one little porta potty for the hugest corral. Everyone was just like peeing and going to the bathroom everywhere because there was like nowhere to go. It was ridiculous. And we were running this race, and it was a pretty warm day, and my stomach was just off. Oh, so let's just say the entire race was a disaster. I remember my parents saw me at like, they saw me a bunch, but they saw me at like mile 18, and my mom was like, "You looked green," or something. I'm just like, oh my God. So I was doing a horrible at that. I think it started to feel off at like mile 10, and it was just like south from there. I was like going to the bathroom behind bus stations. It was the worst. So that was horrible and very unpleasant, but I finished in like, I think 3:41 or something. I mean, I must have stopped like 8 times to go to the bathroom. It was the worst experience ever. Finished that race, could barely walk. I was a disaster afterwards. And I don't know if you guys all remember like the Icelandic volcano that erupted and like disrupted all the airplanes and like that whole fiasco. But yeah, that happened basically right while we were down there, and we had planned a little trip to Spain with, it was me and my parents. We were in Spain, and the whole volcano thing unfolded, and we like couldn't get back anywhere. And I was supposed to go back to work. I literally ended up, we were in the very south of Spain in Malaga or something. I ended up taking like God knows how many trains to get back. Yeah, I went up through Spain, through France. I got back to Paris. I was able to be in Paris a little bit, and then finally was able to make it back to London. But yeah, so that whole trip was such a fun adventure. Um, Definitely had some important life lessons. And nutrition wise, I was using Science and Sport, the Go isotonic gels, which funny enough are very popular now. A lot of my clients are using those gels, and at the time I had a coach, a English coach, a British coach who, and I think SIS is an English company. I'm not sure, but anyways, they were very popular gels in the UK, but they hadn't hit the US yet. So no one in the US carried them or knew what the hell they were. But I was using them a bunch. And when I think back to like how frequently I was taking them, oh man. I mean, I wish I could go back and just redo all of my nutrition planning for all of my early races. I would have been so much faster. It makes me so upset. All my like fast running years, like, but anyways, so after that, I did a New York City marathon, um, which was such an incredible experience. I was trying to qualify for Boston, and at the time it was sub 340, and made it in like 339 and change. So it was such an amazing race. It was so freaking hard, but I had a much better experience, and still my whole nutrition knowledge was lacking, but I was learning a little bit more. I would say at that time I was still pretty stuck on body image. I was quite a bit heavier than I am now. For whatever reason, my body just now at a natural weight just is much more slender than it used to be. I think I've lost a lot of, or not a lot, but I've lost some muscle mass compared to when I was younger. But I remember just trying to lose weight to run faster and that kind of crap, which I know, I mean, we know now is just a load of crap. There's so much more that's important, and I performed great. I performed so great. I just had a very strong race. Um, and yeah, and then I ended up moving back to the US for grad school, moved to New York City because I got into NYU and started that in 2012. So very late to the game. I mean, I didn't go back to grad school until I was like 30 years old. And just remember starting, I mean, I essentially had to get a Bachelor of Science all over again because I was a humanities major in, art history and music at Yale. So having to do like orgo and just all these basic, science classes, and everyone in my program was a lot younger. And it was a little bit, it was very stressful and annoying and very expensive. But just, I mean, I'm still glad I did it. Obviously, it was my passion, and I was so excited to become a dietitian and so excited to do sports nutrition and do everything that I'm doing now. So, very grateful I made that leap, as hard and expensive and frustrating as the whole thing was. It took 3.5 years working straight, like summers, nights, like everything. I worked my butt off in school. It is no joke to become a dietitian when you have not done any of the prerequisites. It really is like going back to college all over again. So I did that. And of course, you have to do the master's program. You have an internship that you have to match to and do like tons and tons of clinical hours and all these different rotations at a hospital. That's what I did up in the Bronx at Montefiore. So, when us dietitians, when we talk about how important it is to work with professionals who are trained and qualified and who give evidence-based advice and, have the proper certifications, it's because of that. Okay. We go through a lot to be trained to become dietitians. It's not just an online certification that you do and then boom, you're a nutritionist. For a registered dietitian, it's a very, very arduous, long process. That's well worth it, but it's more than just some online courses that you complete, in case anyone wasn't aware. Um, so yeah, and it was during grad school that I became like a lot more competitive with my running. I was also coaching. I forgot to mention, before I started grad school, I got a coaching certification in Portland, while also running the Portland Marathon, and that was super fun. And I was kind of coaching on the side here and there. I did a little bit of paid work, and I did some teams and stuff like that. And when I moved to New York, um, that's actually how I got to know Matt Wilpers. Funny enough, of Peloton is I was coaching a female triathlete team with him. He was the other run coach. He was kind of like finishing up on the way out, and I was on the way in, kind of one of the newer coaches. And he was kind of doing his other thing and ended up bringing me into another business that he was creating, that was kind of podcast style nutrition stuff, and he was doing some other things there. And then, of course, he joined Peloton and rose to great fame. But yeah, so if anyone's curious why I have this Matt Wilpers connection, that's kind of where that comes from. He's, of course, an amazing coach and person. But yeah, and so I ran Chicago. I finally qualified for Boston because my New York time, I forgot to mention, I missed the cutoff for Boston by like, I don't know, 10 seconds or something ridiculous. And finally, ran Boston. got engaged, got married. I mean, all that stuff started happening, right? In grad school, Eric and I moved in together. We were living in Stuyvesant Town in New York, and we were there for 10 years, which is nuts. It's been actually I'm coming up on 1 year out in California right now, which is like bonkers for me to think about. We were in New York for a long time. Collectively, I think I was in New York for about 14 years, from the first time I lived there and just recently. But yeah, in terms of nutrition and all of that, I I think I was so traumatized from my first marathon in Paris that I just was really anal about what I ate. And I always try to, I mean, as we all know, like nutrition is such this individual thing. And everyone has such different stomachs and tolerances to things. So I always remember, I have a super sensitive stomach, or at least I used to. And I absolutely cannot assume that my clients do as well. And so I'm always separating that, obviously. But for myself, they always say like doctors are like they're the worst patients or whatever, right? And so of course my nutrition, I look back on my race nutrition. If I were to like make myself my own client, oh my God, I would yell at myself so hard. I would yell at myself for my pathetic nutrition planning. I mean, those SIS gels are not that caloric. They're what, like 80, 90 calories, whatever they are. I probably was taking one every 45 minutes, and that wasn't enough for me. And I was like not eating enough in the morning. I was eating like 3.5 hours before the start and then eating nothing else and then not taking a gel until like 30 minutes in. I mean, stupid stuff. Um, and I was fine. I was performing okay, but I just think about the potential I had, and I could have been so much faster had I fueled better. But I was just so paranoid about going to the bathroom, and I literally would be waiting to start a race and would just be in the porta potty line nonstop until the gun went off. I was so paranoid. So it really, it really traumatized me, and it's really a shame. I wish I had someone talking me down from that and just being like, it's okay. You can train your stomach. That was that one time, and it doesn't have to always be like that, But I didn't at the time. I didn't have my own dietitian. I didn't have someone talking to me like that. But I did still perform well, and I had some really strong. Chicago was brilliant. I ran a 3:33. It went as well as it could have, and I ran Boston, and literally I crossed the 2012 Chicago Marathon finish line still in my little space blanket, grabbed my phone and signed up for Boston that a few months later. So, or well, more than that actually. Sorry. It was the following year, but I guess that following April. So it was back in the day when it didn't fill up like years in advance. And that was the 2013 race. I was there for the bombing, unfortunately. Thank God I was having a good strong day. I ran a 3:36 and had finished and had roamed kind of around the block and was a block down from the bombing. I was with my family at that point. But it was insane. That was an insane year. I'm not sure if any of my other listeners ran that year. But we didn't even know what was happening. We just assumed we thought it was like a cannon, or I don't even know what we thought it was. We didn't find out what happened until like we were walking and walking because we couldn't get on the tee, we couldn't do anything, and my legs were like toast. Oh my God, that was a hard race for me that year, and I ended up walking. Gosh, we probably walked like 5 miles or something because we had to walk backwards on the course to end up getting a friend picked us up, but we couldn't get out, we couldn't get home. But yeah, that was it was. I just remember like hiding my medal because I felt so guilty for finishing when others couldn't or got hurt, or it was a scary time. But I ran again in 2014. I made it by like 4 seconds in, and that was I had a horrible race myself. It was hot and I ran really slow, but the race itself, just in terms of the spirit and all of that, was amazing. Um, and I think I was like still stuck. Again, I want to like lecture my old self. I was stuck on the same nutrition plan. I was superstitious. I was paranoid. I mean, all of the stuff that I never would tell my own clients to do. And now I don't practice myself. Obviously, I know better. That was a long time ago. That was, yeah, 2014 was pretty, 2015 maybe was the last time I was like doing that. So it was a while ago. But still, man, it makes me like cringe when I think of my own nutrition planning for these races. It's quite pathetic. I definitely was underfueling for sure. Not intentionally, but just because I thought it would help my stomach and make me feel better, when really it was counting against me. It was slowing me down. not getting enough fuel in. Um, yeah, so I finished my program. I got my RD in 2014 and was working full time at a hospital, kind of while going to grad school, and doing all that. And we had gotten married in 2013, so that was obviously very exciting and fun. And we were just kind of doing our thing and training. And 2015 was kind of the year that I discovered ultra running. My husband Eric was really into ultras and trail running just as like a concept, and then he started, I forget when he started doing it. It was way before me. And then I was like, "Oh, that's absolutely crazy. I would never do that." And I was like, "Actually, I totally want in. That sounds pretty cool." So I did the North Face puts on this series, and I did a 50K in 2015, the spring of 2015, with Eric, and we basically run together. I mean, I was always a much faster runner. I used to like never be able to run with him in London, and then I basically like was slowing down. He was speeding up, and now I'm just kind of like, I don't care. I'm not as competitive about time anymore. And so we try to run together and just use that as like us time. So we always try to do that if we can. Um, but for the trail running, especially, like we were taking it easy and training for these races together and doing them together, and it was just like really fun adventure. So we did the 50K, and I want to say it was in Virginia, and that was awesome and hard, but awesome. I mean, 50Ks, it's like if you can do a marathon, you can do a 50K, and I think the elevation profile was not too bad on this one. And then it kind of got me hooked, and I what did we do next? Oh, we signed up for my birthday. We did like a 60 something kilometer race. It was this race in like the wilderness of Quebec, Canada, and it was insane. And I know one of my listeners is one of our friends who we made there, and who's very engaged in my social media and everything. Maybe you're listening, Tunica, but she ran with us for a while, and like a beaver dam broke, and it was like there was like water up to our knees. It was just like bonkers. And I forgot to mention I'd also like sprained or broken something in my hand. I had like a whole like cast on one of my hands. So I was like running with this cast on, and I remember my doctor was just like, "You're nuts, but you can't fall, because if you fall, you're gonna really fuck up your arm even more." So I just remember like this entire race, and it's all technical, and I would be like, I cannot fall," and it was very slow going, and we were like absolutely against the cutoffs. We were like barely making these cutoffs. But we made it. We finished it. I'm like blanking on how far. I want to say it was 60 something kilometers. That's all I know. 68. I don't know. It was long. It took a long time. But it was very fun. That was my like birthday run in 2015. And then I was doing these like sports nutrition conferences, and there was like one. It was this conference at Princeton. I met all these really amazing people, some really big name ultra runners, many of whom I've interviewed on the show, like Marshall Ulrich and Travis Macy and Lisa Smith Batchen and all these different people. And Treason was there. I mean, it was like this really cool thing, and I was really honored. Jason Fitzgerald was also where I met him. Really honored to be part of a panel there, and I was speaking, um, and I realized I'm like, I really want to do JFK 50. Dave Horton was also there. It was like this cast of like, amazing people in the ultra world, and Eric had already run the race. I want to say once or twice, and I had paced him for 20 miles one year, and I was like, I'm ready to run a 50 miler. So we decided to do it, and my race was an absolute dumpster fire of a race. And oh man, I need to get back and do a 50 miler. I got some business to do on that kind of course. And maybe back to JFK. I don't know. At some point, I need to do it right. Actually, run it, because my foot got messed up. I don't know what I did to my foot, but I could barely walk on it. But of course, me being like the absolute stubborn person that I am, refused to DNF. I'd never DNF'd a race. I DNF'd? No, I think I still have never DNF'd a race. And I was like, screw this, I'm getting the end. And there was the 12 miles left, and I basically found this really young girl, like a college student, who had like hurt her hip or something, and she was also like, screw this, I'm finishing this race no matter what it takes. And it was like me and this like us and this old dude, like one of the old military guys that like speed walk the entire course. And we were all like walking like 14 or 15-minute miles for 12 miles. It was excruciating. And I was like, I am fucking finishing this race. So finished my 50 miler, and that was that the last 50? That was the last ultra that I did, and messed up my body real good. Um, yeah, that was my last experience with an ultra. Um, and that was back in 2015. Um, but really overall, like that was when I was getting into trail running and ultras. It's also when I started my private practice with nutrition. Um, I ran Big Sur Marathon, which is the last road marathon that I've done back in 2016. I'm running it this year, of course. I'm training for that right now. Um, and after that, I got pregnant and had kids, and it was kind of like not really a priority for me. I ran through my um, I ran through my first pregnancy and felt pretty good overall. But had some complications and always felt really guilty, and like my running was to blame, and my doctor assured me like 1,000 times over that it was not my running and I did nothing wrong and it was just a genetic thing. But the problem was that basically the baby was always measuring small. I'm of course a very small person. Eric's a small person too. We're not like huge tall people. So, but it was always measuring small. And then at a certain point in my third trimester, the baby wasn't growing anymore, which is very concerning. So I was diagnosed with intrauterine growth restriction and Ariel, this is Ariel's pregnancy. She was small for gestational age. So at a certain point, it was like I was going uptown. You know, I live downtown. I was going uptown to be monitored every other day. They were wanting to induce me, and I asked like if I could at least wait until like 37 or 38 weeks, so she's, you know, full term. And it was really stressful and really scary, and the doctors were not always didn't always have the best bedside manner. My doctor was amazing, but some of these other doctors who were monitoring me at the, you know, maternal, I forget what it's called, you know, the place where you go for all the scans and whatnot. And so I was an induced, and Ariel was born at 5 pounds, 0.02 ounces. She missed the NICU by 0.02 ounces. But she ended up having to go to the ER and be admitted on day 4, or yeah, right after we got out of the hospital, because she had severe jaundice and some other issues. She had dropped to like 4 pounds, 10 ounces, 9 ounces. I mean, she was so tiny. Oh, it was so tiny. It was so stressful. It was a very hard couple of weeks in the beginning. And but yeah, that was my kind of being thrown into motherhood. I know so many moms have had it so much worse than me, and parenthood is just so hard. It's just so hard. Um, but I guess pregnancy for me, not to dwell too much on it, but overall, it wasn't something I loved. You know, it's always hard to kind of experience your body changing so dramatically. And yes, it was amazing to be growing this life inside of me, and it's a beautiful, miraculous process, but also your body isn't yours. And I think especially for athletes, you know, that can be really hard. Anyone with any kind of disordered eating or eating disorder history, that can be really hard. Although for me, it wasn't like the weight gain wasn't a problem. I actually really loved my bump. It was really beautiful, and I actually kind of loved my body when I was pregnant. It was a very, even though things didn't always feel great, and I didn't like that I couldn't exercise in the same way. Um, it was, I don't know, it was a very love hate thing, I would say. But I did run a half marathon my second trimester. It was super fun. I ran as long as I could, and then stopped. And I would say it was pregnancy that kind of got me over this whole concept of like walking is an exercise and blah blah blah, being like really snobby about what counts as exercise. And then I just got to a point where I'm like, any movement counts, and that is the reality. Movement counts. It doesn't have to be always like super sweaty and super intense and all that kind of stuff. I mean, every type of movement has a different purpose and a different benefit. Um, so that was a real good learning moment for me, you know, being able to be super pregnant and go out for a walk and feel like this was such a great form of exercise for me, and that's enough, and that I do not have to do more. It is okay. That was really lovely. But I think what was most hard for me, or the hardest part for me, was postpartum. A few things. I had pretty bad. Well, it kind of developed over a year, really. I got pretty bad postpartum anxiety and depression. I've always been prone to anxiety and depression, so I guess it's not that much of a surprise. But I actually got a really bad hip injury. I returned to running way too fast. I was so eager. I wanted to lose the baby weight, yes, in part, but mostly I just missed running. I missed being alone. I missed like just having me time and being outside. It was winter. And I just took it too fast. I took it way too fast. I was so cocky and just like, oh, whatever. I wasn't doing the appropriate like strength training and pelvic floor stuff and just all the stuff you're supposed to do. Got super injured, couldn't run. It was really hard. And anyone who's been injured knows, and I've been injured so many times, and not the first time I had a hip injury either. When you can't do the thing that you want to do, it's depressing. It's hard, and there are obviously different things you can do to cope with that. But it's tough. It's really tough. And adding a newborn on top of that, or young baby, it just became really hard. Breastfeeding also was really tricky for me, and it was very stressful, and I was really hard on myself, and was determined to make it work. And I added formula too, and I resisted it, but then was like, whatever, it doesn't matter. I just didn't have the supply, but it was just a very hard thing. So that was very stressful. And I did that for about 7 months. And it was really when I stopped breastfeeding at 7 months of when she was 7 months years old, well, 7 months old, that the anxiety and depression really came in. My hormones went nuts, and I was just in such a dark place and struggled and resisted. I went to therapy. She suggested going on some sort of medication. I saw a psychiatrist. He prescribed Lexapro, and I was like, hell no, I'm not taking that, resisting it. And I remember Ariel turning 1 years old. 1 year old. Yeah, that's what I mean. Um, and we had this big party, and it was in our little apartment, and my parents flew in for it, and it was just like super busy in our place and very overwhelming. And of course, me being me, I wanted everything to be perfect, and I was just so stressed out and so crabby and cranky and tired, and just losing sight of this celebration of our Ariel, and of being close to my husband. And I just was not in a good place. And I just remember finishing this party and waking up the next day and just being like, I can't do this anymore. And I popped one of those pills, and I've been on Lexapro since. It's been, what, 4 years? Yeah, 4 years. And I never really, and it's not something I'm ashamed of. And again, it's something I tell people openly. I haven't really had opportunities to talk about it on the show. Um, I've talked about it with clients before. It's actually kind of crazy how many people are on antidepressants, anti-anxiety meds. It's something though that I always thought would be temporary. But I got pregnant. We decided we want another kid, and I got pregnant again. Ended up having a miscarriage at about 8 weeks, 8.5 weeks, 9 weeks. So did not go off of it at that time. It was very hard. And kept kept on, and then was in my pregnant, and then got pregnant with Isla, and what was that? I guess 2019, and was thinking, well, I mean, if I had such bad postpartum anxiety and depression with Ariel, then I would think it's a good idea to stay on it for Isla. And so I did, and was always planning on going off it. And then pandemic hit right after, and was like, I think I'm gonna stay on this for now. And that's kind of where I'm at. And I'm back in therapy now, and it's such a beneficial thing. This whole past year has been hard, or just with the pandemic, obviously for anyone, and certainly parents of young kids. It's been rough. But kind of at that point where I think I'm finally ready to start tapering off of it. Potentially, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, I think that medication is such a helpful tool. Thank God we have it, especially for people who really, really need it, or whether it's a lifelong thing or a temporary thing. So yeah, that's kind of, where I'm at with all that stuff. And for my third pregnancy, my pregnancy with Isla, um, it was a healthy pregnancy. She grew great. I gained a little bit more weight with it, which is good because I couldn't gain very much weight with Ariel. I always struggled. And I think if I'm honest myself, I was thinking, like, is it because I wasn't eating enough? Like, I tried so hard. I ate so much stuff. I ate all these caloric things. But maybe like on some level, I still just wasn't getting enough in. Maybe there's some appetite things in. Maybe I was burning too much through exercise. I probably could have done a better job when I look back. Um, and this time with the third pregnancy, running just was not very fun. It didn't feel that great. I certainly stopped running much earlier. I did run another half marathon in my second trimester, and that was super fun. And I did a 10K, and then just things hurt. My back hurt, everything hurt. And I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna give this a big break. There was no drive to train there, but thankfully I got my Peloton at the start of the pregnancy, and that's where I really started riding that a lot. And that saved me in my pregnancy. It kept me active, especially in the winter. It was great for the pandemic, obviously. Um, and yeah, it was a nice change, and I felt myself really just like moving away from running and a desire to run. And after I gave birth to Isla, I just took my time. I saw a pelvic floor therapist. I really just took my time getting back into it. And it was really, really worth it. I was such a stronger runner because of it. Not to say I haven't gotten injured since then, I have, but it's just been much better. Um, in August 2018, actually, it was right before I was born, that October. I started this podcast, so that was obviously super, super fun. I'm always struggling to kind of figure out what to do with my business, and that's a whole other topic. I won't get into it. But, I see my clients, and I'm trying to figure out how to grow my business and what I want to do. And I'd always kind of received comments like, write a cookbook or write a book or write a whatever. And I just didn't want to. I'm like, I don't want to do that. And I was on a run and was thinking to myself, well, what do I want to do? Well, I love to talk. Clearly, I've been rambling for like, I don't even know how long. But I love to talk, and I love this concept of learning people's nutrition stories and basically like their life, but through this kind of nutrition lens, or, just topics related to that and how they're getting to their sport. But doing a little something different. I mean, as far as I can tell, no one else is really doing this. And, of course, that idea was born on a run. So I've been having a lot of fun with it. We'll kind of see where this whole thing goes. It hasn't really turned into anything lucrative, obviously. It's something I do really purely for fun at this point in time. It'd be great if I made money off it, but I don't, and that's totally okay. Um, I'm just happy that I have something that I truly am passionate about and that it's being enjoyed by so many people. So just going to continue doing it as long as people want to keep listening, I guess. Um, but yeah, in summer 2020, we were in New York City in a very small apartment with two littles and trying to work. And like so many people, it was just so, so, so hard without childcare. And we came out to California. Of course, you can check out the show that Eric and I put out. We did a big run on the Skyline to Sea Trail in Big Basin, like, oh gosh, 3 days before it burned down. So sad. But we had a great time training for that and just kind of creating our own adventure and make your own little race or whatever you want to call it. And it really got me like training for longer distances again, and got my running mojo back. Like I was so into trail running again. It was so beautiful. It was so wonderful. It was really refreshing. It just made me want to go and do these things again for the first time since, gosh, 2016 basically. Um, and then of course we moved out here March 2021, so almost a year ago. And I've just been really slowly building back my mileage, and I ran my first trail marathon in September, and training for which I did a podcast episode on, and right now training for this 50K in May. So yeah, and in terms of nutrition, gosh, I've been rambling about my life and not tying in all the nutrition. I just realized this is where the other me interviewing me would be asking all the specific nutrition questions. Now I know why all my guests ramble and I have to bring them back to nutrition. Um, but yeah, I mean, what is like my eating like? I don't really follow any particular style of eating. Um, no diets or anything like that. In my life, I've never been vegetarian or vegan or anything like that. I would say that I tend to largely gravitate naturally towards, or to varying degrees, I would say, to a vegetarian diet, just because there are many of the things I enjoy. I've gone like through phases where meat or chicken or things just like really gross me out for unknown reasons. But lately, I've certainly in the past year, and especially when living with my parents, like we've been eating meat and fish and chicken and all that stuff pretty regularly. But yeah, I enjoy all foods. I'm just allergic to shellfish. That's the only thing I can't eat and won't eat. And the only weird thing I actually just posted this on social media today, but I have like a really weird relationship with vegetables now, and I don't know if any of my listeners can relate. But since my pregnancy, especially like my last pregnancy, I'm just like really not in the mood to eat them like so much of the time. It's so weird. I love vegetables. It's just like there's like some hurdle now between me and eating them. So I have to get creative sometimes. I throw them in smoothies, I make soups, I just batch prep, roasted veggies and things like that so I can easily throw them in. Um, Salads, I'm like so iffy on. Sometimes I want them, sometimes they really gross me out. It's very strange. Um, but yeah, like in my pregnancy, like I really could not eat vegetables. It was really bizarre. So I'm still struggling with that a little bit, but for the most part, I eat all things, and I would say that I've been pretty much since gosh, yeah. I mean, since graduating from my RD program, my relationship with food has been pretty solid. Thank God. I've really gotten to a better place, and I'd say in particular, like having kids, that's what really sealed the deal. And just being pregnant, I know a lot of people regress in pregnancy. It's scary. I mean, sadly, a lot of people have regression into eating disorder behavior during a pregnancy, and it's really really sad and really hard, and I've worked with people who have struggled. But for me, it solidified all of my food freedom. It solidified me just getting in touch with what my body wanted and fulfilling any cravings and listening to my hunger and fullness, but equally knowing that I can't always rely on my appetite. And I wasn't always doing a great job. I actually lost way too much weight postpartum. I think related to the depression in part. I lost a lot of muscle mass. I think that was partly why I got way too skinny again. And it happened also after my third pregnancy a bit. But I'm in a really solid place now, and I'm much more on top of. I'm being a better patient. Let's put it that way. I'm trying to apply all of the things that I talk to my clients about and apply it to myself, which is always hard. It's always hard paying attention to yourself, whether, as a mom and really making time for yourself to do things and eat well and all that stuff. I'm really trying. I'm trying to be better. And I think I've been doing a much better job in recent years. But yeah, my own nutrition, pretty basic, I guess you could say. And in terms of products that I use, I love Tailwind, of course. I'm one of their Tailwind trailblazers, so I get like free samples and stuff like that. I don't get paid for anything, but I do love their products. I use it for myself in my training, mostly for like trail running and stuff like that. I wouldn't use it for personally. I wouldn't use it for my road marathons. I love Spring Energy, although really was disappointed to hear some of their marketing language. I posted about that recently, that they were doing like guilt-free fueling and stuff like that. I definitely don't support that. But in terms of the actual taste and whatnot of the products, I use those pretty exclusively on my runs these days out in the trails. My favorites are Awesome Sauce and Canterbury. I use Hill Aid. I used to like coffee, but now I think it tastes gross. Some of the higher fat products, I just like, they're really thick. I'm not into it. I'd say the ones that I really use or like the most are the Canterbury and the Awesome Sauce. They're the higher carb ones, and they're quite delish. Well, no one loves gels, but as far as gels goes, they're delicious. I'll put that in quotes. And what else do I like? I like some of like the Honey Stinger or Goo waffles, the Stroop waffles. Those are quite good. I love, in terms of real food, again, I'm trail running, I'm doing training for ultras and stuff, so I'm going really slow these days. So what's in my vest right now, I'll pack like fig bars, like I think it's like the Stone Bakery, I forget what it's called, but it's like these little like blueberry or raspberry or fig bar things that I find pretty easy to get down. Um, potatoes with salt, potato chips, pretzels. I'm kind of working with different foods right now, and I'm testing what I like. So I'm going to test out like peanut butter and jelly sandwiches again, and kind of just seeing what sits well. I won't be doing that for Big Sur. Big Sur will be a purely tailwind and gel situation, but for the 50K, we'll definitely tap into some real food and get some savory stuff in. Um, but yeah, those are kind of the products I like. I still love SIS. Funny enough, they've become super popular now. They're everywhere. SAS is great. I tend to go for like the thinner, less sweet gels personally. Puma's pretty good. Morton's a little funky, but it's okay. I tend to like that one okay. Yeah, those are just some of the ones that I use myself. Of course, whenever I work with my clients, I present like all the different options because everybody likes different stuff, right? So what I like is kind of irrelevant. That's what it all comes down to. What works for me, like who cares? But I'm sharing it anyways because this is my little nutrition story. Um, and yeah, I don't know. What else can I share? I feel like I've kind of covered it. I think we're in a place now that we're finally just like not stable, but relatively speaking, after like so much chaos and moving and not being able to find a house and all of that. So that's been really nice. Oh, I forgot to mention some other products that I like. I love Kodiak cakes. I use I almost solely use the buttermilk mix, and I'll make pancakes or waffles using like a mashed banana. I'll do 2 eggs instead of one per cup, or dry mix, 1 cup, and I'll do milk to make it kind of higher in protein. My kids love them. I put chocolate chips in. They're like such huge fans. Um, and for bars, I'm really into Go Macro right now. RX is good. Lara bars, Picky bars, Kind bars. Those are kind of my go-tos. Protein powders right now, I'm digging. I always struggle with protein. I really am very sensitive to stevia. I absolutely hate the taste. And also, I just am not a fan of stevia, just generally speaking. So I've really had a hard time finding things that I don't absolutely despise. But I've been into Clean Athletes, Clean with a K, their whey protein isolate. It's unflavored. I also tried Vega Made Simple. It's a pea protein. And it just has some cane sugar in it. So those are the two that I've been using recently. I'm getting those I paid for myself, so those weren't like sponsored or anything. But I am getting some samples of other products that are like unflavored whey and other things. So we'll share those details with you because I know everyone's always on the lookout for new products. Um, yeah, in terms of kind of what I tend to do before a run or a race, my go-to is oatmeal, just rolled oats made with water or milk, um, a, a mashed banana, sometimes a little peanut butter thrown in. Back in the day when I was like really paranoid, I would literally do half a cup of dry oats, a banana, and water, and nothing else. I mean, not enough food. Not enough food. And that was like 3.5 hours before. Oh my God. And that was like before an ultra marathon. Oh, goodness gracious. So I'm doing a lot more now. And I'll typically do my first gel 5 minutes before, and then I feel every 30-ish minutes or so. For trail running, it's my current strategy that I'm using is I'm combining uh, Tailwind, at least 100 calories an hour of that as like my base level kind of salts, fluids, some calories, and then I'm adding on top of that either a spring gel or some food of some kind. So that's kind of my strategy for 50K. I think for a longer thing, I would definitely be doing a bit more food and maybe some less gels, but I'm not sure yet. I will see kind of what I end up training for. Um, in terms of what a typical day looks like, I get up really early with my children, and definitely coffee is like crucial. I literally like look forward to my Nespresso latte like as I go to bed, and I go to bed very early with my husband because my husband works New York hours. But we'll go to bed like 9 or 9:30, and I'm like, oh, I can't wait to enjoy my latte and wake up and have my coffee, and make my kids food, and breakfast can be really anything. I tend to work out after I drop them off at school in the morning. So I kind of do my workout and house stuff, whatever, in the morning, and I see clients and do other stuff, do my working stuff in the afternoon. That's kind of my whole thing. My husband's on the complete opposite schedule. He works from like 4 a.m. to, I don't know, 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. or whatever it is. And then he goes for a run, and then he picks the kids up. So we kind of flip flop. But yeah, I guess there's no real typical day, but I try to practice what I preach. I try to eat every few hours, balance stuff, getting more protein, and I'm trying to be better about that because in the past I've been pretty bad about meeting my own protein needs. I think that's largely, or that's part of the reason why I think I did lose some muscle mass and just not eating enough total. Um, And yes, in terms of what challenges I'm still facing, as I said, since pregnancy, just, certain foods just not appealing to me. I have an appetite, but sometimes I'm just like really turned off to certain foods, or I've just found like I'll like go, it's time to eat something. I don't know if anyone can relate. It's time to eat something, but I like literally will just stare at everything and be like, I don't want to eat anything in front of me, which is really horrible and depressing as someone who loves food and as a dietitian. I'm like, how embarrassing, how horrible, like just very sad because I want to eat something, but I'm like looking around and be like, ugh, I don't want to eat anything. I'm like, maybe I'll just have a bowl of cereal for dinner. I'm like, that's really pathetic. But dude, I've been there so many times. I don't know, it's something I'm still working on. It certainly does help to have something that's like prepped and ready to go, especially when you're tired. I think eating enough, but that's been a lot better now. My weight's in a really good place. I don't feel like I'm under fueling or under eating or overtraining or anything like that. I have a really good, healthy balance of all of that. And I'm so tuned into my body and also exercising based on how I feel. So I'm just very grateful looking back, especially in this conversation, looking back on everything I've kind of gone through. Um, you know, there are always those voices in your back of your head. Again, if anyone's been through this, they know. There's always going to be that voice that comes up, oh, your thighs, or oh, blah, blah. But on the whole, I'd say that, yeah, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful that I've made it through, that I can eat cookies and ice cream and whatever I want, whatever day, on any day, at any point in the day, and it's not a big deal. It really is just, who cares? It's very liberating. So that's been really, really nice. Um, and just, I'd say the other challenge for me, keeping my energy levels up, with the little ones running around all the time, not always getting the best sleep, still being stressed out, uncertain times, uncertain future, just not really knowing what's happening and with the world just being such a crazy place. It always is, but in particular right now. So just kind of maintaining good energy levels, I still find that quite challenging, and trying to do what I can through food, but stress management and sleep and all those other things that I always talk about with my clients, I'm trying to work on for myself. Um, and yeah, what's on the horizon for me, I already shared, I'm going to be running the Big Sur Marathon just as a training run for a 50K, the Quicksilver 50K I'm doing on May 14th is when the 50K is. I still really want to do the rim to rim, or maybe rim to rim to rim in Grand Canyon, but childcare is like a real issue. To be honest, my parents will not watch my kids because they think it's too dangerous. That's the reality. That's why I did not do that for my 40th birthday. So we might have to wait a little bit, but maybe when the kids are older, or I don't know, we'll figure it out. To be honest, we were not ready to do that in the fall, so it really is a good thing we didn't do it. But I've never been to the Grand Canyon. Dying to do that. It just sounds like such an epic experience. All right, I've been rambling for I don't even know how long. I don't even know if anyone's still listening to this. Maybe you're not. But I'm going to wrap it up with the quick bites questions, as I always do. Favorite meal or snack when in a hurry? Probably just like toast with peanut butter and banana. Or actually, I've really been into the oatmeal Go Macro bars. I know I always harp on my clients for like being too reliant on bars, and I really try not to be, but they've been really lifesavers in the car recently, especially post run when I'm really hungry and just need to like get back and get to work and everything. So, yeah, I'd say those two. Favorite meal or snack when not in a hurry? That's a really good question. Uh, I clearly didn't think about these in advance. It's funny because I've been asking everybody these questions. You'd think I'd have answers ready to go. That's a really interesting question. I don't know. I don't know if I have a favorite. I love pizza, like really good New York pizza. Oh, I miss it so much. Or New York bagels with cream cheese. Oh, I'm dreaming of all my New York foods. I like just making bowls. I think if I were just to go for something that's healthy and balanced, not too hard, some sort of like bowl with roasted veggies and a whole grain or sweet potatoes and some sort of a protein. Or another thing I always love to make is a really veg and bean heavy chili with, I've been doing ground bison recently, or beef or turkey, or even just a veggie one, and sprinkling some shredded cheese and avocado on top. That's been really tasty. That's a staple. Favorite post-race meal or snack? 100% hamburger, sweet potato fries. No question. And pickles. Biggest cooking catastrophe. Ugh. Um, yeah, I think I answered this one in the last, actually in Lael's episode, because she flipped it on me. Um, I think I've burned things. I've forgotten about things. Oh my God, I don't know if it was me or Eric, but in Stuytown, we like left the stove on like it was a gas burner on low overnight. Oh my God. Like, holy crap. We woke up the next morning, like just grateful we didn't blow ourselves up. So that was fun. That probably is the biggest. We weren't cooking anything, but it's related, right? Most bizarre or exotic food that I've ever tried. I was in the Amazon rainforest in down South America, and I was doing like this. It was like 1 week of my um, Ecuador, or I don't know, where was I? I don't know what. Yeah, well, somewhere in a jungle. Actually, I don't remember where I was, but I was doing as part of my like Spanish learning program, and we spent a week in the jungle. And we went on this excursion with one of the guides, and there were these like live bugs that looked. I don't even know what the heck they were. They were like big and round and squishy, and they were alive. And he was trying to get us to eat them alive. And he's like, well, if you don't eat them alive, you can eat them cooked. And so I was just like, I can't. This thing was like squishing and squirming. And it was so disgusting. I ate it cooked, though, and it was so gross. But that probably counts. How do I like my eggs cooked? Always. I love eggs cooked always, but probably my favorite is fried with a runny yolk. Favorite beverage? I just love my seltzer and coffee. Coffee is just so good. What foods remind me of growing up? Comfort foods. We used to make something called camp stew, and it's something that was from this summer camp that my sister and I went to in the area called Kennelin. Really like very old school kind of summer camp that's in the redwoods up here. And we would go overnight in the redwoods, go camping, and it would be like ground meat and carrots and potatoes and onions, and you'd throw it in a tin foil and you throw it on the fire. And whenever we would go camping with my family, we'd always make the camp stew. And I remember the 1 year at Kennelin, I got really like greedy, I guess, and like I was really hungry, and I loaded my little foil thing with like way too many potatoes, and mine just like wouldn't cook, and everyone else was eating theirs and mine was not cooked at all because I put too much in it, and I was really sad. That's all I remember about camp stew. But that, and my mom used to make a really yummy chicken curry. That was really delicious. Favorite ice cream flavor? Forever will be cookies and cream. The best. And top 3 items of gear that are most essential to my active lifestyle. Running shoes, which I now have 4 pairs that I love. I went from having like no good shoes at all for way too long, hurting my feet, to 2 awesome trail shoes and 2 awesome road shoes. I have a New Balance for road. I have a Hoka Rincon for road. I have a Hoka Challenger for trails and a Nike Pegasus for trails. So really into those. My Lululemon Capri running tights that have these amazing pockets on either side that I can stuff all my gels and phone and whatever else in there. Really into it. And my running watch. I was a Garmin lady for a long time, and Eric got me for my birthday a Coros because the battery life on my old Garmin was the worst. And the Coros, I have a super basic Coros, and I'm digging it so far. So that's always fun to track my runs. All right. Literally don't even know how long I've been talking. Again, don't know if anyone's going to listen to this, or I think I'll publish it. Why not? But hey, hope you listened. I hope you've enjoyed it. Hopefully I haven't rambled too long. And if you have any questions for me about anything, or you want to chat about anything, maybe something resonated, maybe you can relate, I don't know, maybe you learned some new things about me, let me know. Reach out. I'd love to hear from you. I'm an open book. I'm not hiding anything, and I'm happy to share stuff. And I think it's important to be open about all these things. And, probably good to make myself a little bit more vulnerable and get personal, right? Everybody else on the show, they're sharing all these things, and it feels good to share myself sometimes. So anyways, thanks for listening, everybody. That's it for today. I'll wrap it up. As always, you can reach me, eatforendurance@gmail.com. I'm not sure when the next show is going to be because, as I said, I haven't booked anyone else. But if you have any other guests you'd like me to reach out to, please let me know. And please rate or review my show on iTunes or wherever you listen to podcasts. I asked you last time. I haven't really gotten that many more ratings, but it really does help reach more listeners. All right, guys, thank you so much and have a great day.